see Roger.
Yes, he was pulling in when I was pulling in.
I saw him in there getting a couple questions. Full house today.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. We're a couple of minutes early, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Again, welcome everyone to the March meeting of the Audit Committee for Savannah-Chatham County Public Schools.
Wait for the live stream.
We're not on? She gave me the thumbs up.
Okay.
You're live.
We are now live. Now we're live. I'll start over. Act 2. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the March meeting of the Audit Committee for the Savannah-Chatham County Public Schools. I wanted to welcome everybody and thank everybody for being here this morning. I think, unless I'm mistaken, we have the full committee, so that's wonderful to see. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time. With that being said, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Also move.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the agenda for the March meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
The agenda is approved. With that, we'll turn it over to Ms. Underwood.
Thank you. So the first item on the agenda is the Audit Committee informational items. And what we would like to really highlight here, unless anybody else has any questions, is that the internal audit department still has those 2 open positions, but we found a candidate, and she will be beginning in April 29th, so she will start at that point. So at our May 1, we'll introduce her. Looking forward to that, and she's excited too. As of the peer review results, that should also be within your packet. I just want to announce, based on the results of our review, it is our opinion that the Savannah-Chatham Public School System's Internal Audit Department's internal control system was adequately designed and operating effectively to provide reasonable assurance of compliance with government auditing standards and applicable legal and regulatory requirements for engagements during the period of July 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2023. They always look at 3 years. So they will be back in 2027 to conduct this same type of review. The other thing we would like to add is we're still in progress, so the audit graduation rate, we're still on schedule for that one. That should be to you at the next April meeting. The audit of purchasing processes, we're still going through reviewing. There's a lot of documentation and standards that involve that one, so we are still in the preliminary stages. And the audit of concession and school store processes, that is being worked on and wrapped up as well, and that should be to you next month as well. In addition, we have this new management action report. This is at the request of Mr. Woods. Would you like to speak more upon this, sir?
Well, first of all, let me congratulate you on the review by the External Quality Control Review of the Association of Local Government Auditors, which I didn't know existed until right now. So congratulations. All kidding aside, that's very well done.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I asked the staff to kind of give us a summary. We see a management action plan in every one of our audits, but the feedback loop to that management action plan sometimes gets lost in the operations of the district. So I just asked Leah to prepare a report so that the committee can see, okay, this is what the management action plan said we were going to do, and this is kind of that allows us to check in every month and say, how are we doing? Are we on target? Are we slipping a little bit? Or do we need more time? So it's just an opportunity for the committee to see in a nutshell every management action plan and what the status of it is. The intent's not to take too long, but to help us keep that feedback loop viable. So.
And the ones that are in this management action report are only the management action plans that are still open for response. They're not the completed ones. You'll actually see that in the summary of audit reports that I'll briefly describe later as well. Now remember, going back with this new status report that we have created, after April 2024, we will be moving forward and giving you the numbers as well of how much has been completed, how many have been open, if there's any management responses that said, hey, we need to change the due date, those kind of things as well, because that is part of the KPI that we are a part of in the new strategic plan that we are monitoring as well. So does anybody have any questions?
Yes, sir.
Go
Go ahead.
you. So this report, I think is really valuable. Thank you for requesting it. I was looking at trends and in some of the responses. Some things that were noted in December are on track for being addressed this spring. There are several things from 2021 that are still hanging out there. I noticed that some of them, not all of them, some of them were like technology related, so I tried to kind of imagine what was happening in 2021 with technology. We were building an entire virtual campus. So I understand, we didn't get to those, but in the remarks, or is there some explanation for delays in some of the items that are still not finished versus others?
So at this time, so I can describe the process, and this will go into also the summary of the summary of reports as well later on, that this is part of the process that, say for instance, when it says July 2024 is the current date, because that's the current date they said that it was due, in August of 2024, the very first day, we will be sending out an email to the parties that are tasked, the management divisions that are tasked, and request an update of where they are in the status of what they've said they're going to do underneath that MAP action item. And we will, depending on what's involved, we may seek evidence, but usually they give us a description. So in some of these cases right now, they are open because we have not gotten a response. But I would like to get feedback from you moving forward. What would you like in that remark section from us when we complete this process?
Well, since I raised the item, I'll address it first. Some of the MAP action item narrative in the third column tells you what's happening. Well, this is expected next month, and we plan to do this then. Some of them, it says it's been completed. So if in that column, it can be said delays were experienced due to vendor issues, or delays were experienced due to transition in leadership or staffing or something, that's sufficient. I don't really need anything in remarks. I think it would be kind of wonky to have some have explanations in remarks, some have explanations in the MAP column. So if it was in the MAP action item, I would be fine there. And remarks maybe could be relegated to observations of staff, because now that I'm asking for it, I want the information, but mixing it might be a mess. If the MAP action item is always the management response and explanations of where they are, then remarks can be observations of the audit department or something like that. That's
Okay.
one way to look at it.
That's how I was viewing it, but I didn't want to move forward because this is your report, and I want to support you all in however you need this information.
Okay, and I mean, I wouldn't want to put anybody on the spot, but it could be, reminders sent, non-responsive, whatever those observations are. Thanks for the question.
If I can just add to that, as I have reviewed many of these, a lot of these are due to vacancies in the district and a lot of key positions. School nutrition program, that person was just hired in December and is just kind of getting her start in the district. Several are related to grants. We haven't had a grant writer in the district for at least my entire tenure. I don't know how long that goes back, but at least a year. So I would say a lot of these are attributed to that. One of the things I've committed to with Leah during my one-on-ones with staff, I'll have this as a side-by-side document so that I'm also raising it as a part of my conversations with individuals. I don't think there are many cases, though, where I would just say there is a total lack of responsiveness. There's an underlying reason for many of these.
So I was looking through these, and some stuck out. There's one that's very troubling for me, and that is developing policies and procedures for background checks for vendors that have the same interaction with students as volunteers.
I agree.
That's very troubling. And the current date that they have here is October of last year. This is this has got to be cleared up post haste for me. We have an attorney on our committee who's sitting there going, "Oh my God!" So, yeah, that's just.
I guess, let me, maybe to help clarify to me, right? So the one that's being discussed is, I think the very first one says it started in May of 2017.
That is correct.
And then it looks like, the original date was October 2018, then another update, December 2019, then another update, December 2020, then another update, June 2022, and then a current date of October 1 of 2023. And maybe this is where we were talking about the remarks section, right? So clearly the audit committee addressed the issue, came up with an action plan, and then on the follow-ups, are we to assume that those actions were not followed?
Yeah, so what you can assume here is in November of 2018, we reached out to the division that was responsible for this and requested a status update. Now, sometimes we don't give their status update, but I think that's where we could put that in the remarks. Like, we can say, hey, we spoke with, this division, and this is their response. We can add that in the remarks. And, if there's a date change, we can add that as well. But what they provided to us is basically give us another year, and that's why you see that December 2019 date. So each date that you see is where management has said to us, we need more time, give us till this date.
I guess, do you give them pushback sometimes to say, this is something that we've given you 2 years to resolve, and asking for another year is kind of unacceptable at this point? Do you say that? Do you give them like
Yeah.
deadlines?
Right, so we do ask them, we give them about 2 weeks, if not a month, to respond, but we have no authority outside of that, of just sending emails.
So I guess that's an issue, and I also am an attorney, so here we go. So if we have these grandiose ideas of audits, and there's no real teeth to your pushback, we're going in circles. Have we decided that we need an internal policy, or at least we do have, the school board chair here today and the superintendent? There needs to be some teeth to this, especially, one of the ones they pointed out was the background check. You can't just keep saying, let's put it off for another year. It has to be, if you don't respond to this, you need to tell us why, or someone else needs to take this over so this gets accomplished. And I feel like maybe there's a lack of that if we're just adding on years.
Correct.
It's my responsibility to hold people accountable for it. So this is new. I'm in my first year, so I will catch up and make sure that that's happening from moving forward.
Okay.
So, go ahead. Go ahead. Ladies first.
Thank you. Well, I have questions about, so it's owned by the superintendent's office, is that?
The management action plan is management's action plan to respond to the audit.
Right, but an audit happened, and this was a response to it.
Yes,
So
yes, ma'am.
what was the owning unit that generated this recommendation?
That would have been management of the district,
Okay.
yes.
So it came out of HR?
In this particular audit, that would have been the Division of Finance, because it belongs to contracts, which is purchasing.
Okay, so I have many questions about this, because if you are coming in as a service provider, then your contract is supposed to address some of these issues. And what I'm wondering is if the absence of a policy wasn't because it was in the RFP guidelines, that you had to meet these requirements to receive the contract, that your people had to be vetted, that the background checks are happening with your organization before you can receive the contract. I don't know that, but I'm asking that because I'm thinking the service providers that I would have in mind for this would be doing that work. So I don't know if there's a need for more information, and I, not for a moment, do not agree that people need to have background checks, but I would have baked that into the contract that you wouldn't have been able to get the job. We wouldn't have made you a service delivery site. if you didn't have that as part of your protocol for your employees.
Right.
Because otherwise, if we're requiring that, that means we're paying for all of those $25 plus background checks for all those people. And why would we take on that expense if we're paying them money? They're making money off of it, they ought to be doing it. So I would ask that with the superintendent pulling this in under her purview and looking into it, to kind of do that forensic analysis to see whether or not this is covered in another area that wasn't detected in the audit.
Well, we looked at with this process, when we do a contract audit, we look at the RFP process as well as the contract. We look at the whole package. That's why our recommendation was to consider developing policies and procedures for background checks. So we didn't define where they were supposed to put it. We just didn't see anything that required them at any stage, whether it was the RFP or within the contract. So their response is that we will review current policies and regarding for vendors that will have supervised interaction determined. So it's not necessarily whether it was in the contract, or it could have been if that's where their procedures, where they decided to place the procedures to be in the RFP.
I see. So, but the policy could be just that. There is a background check, that there's a verified background check. And so our policy, it would be interesting to see how we would put that in our policies such that we would be able to manage enforcement in a reasonable
Yes.
way.
Yes, because there are other questions. When I saw this, there were other questions that came to mind for me. So the requirement that they have adequate insurance to cover everything. I mean, you know, when I was running the children's choir, we had specific child endangerment policies.
All of the horrible insurances.
All
you
the
don't wanna have
horrible
to-
insurances, make sure that they have, because if they don't have it, it's on us, and we don't want it on us.
But are these off-site vendors or internal vendors?
These are off-site vendors. No, these are, no.
If they're internal, then we cover it.
Yeah, like if it was volunteers or some sort, well,
That's
there
fine.
is a
No,
background
but we're
check
talking about
process for that.
outside vendors.
Like,
I mean, are we talking about coverage, insurance coverage for activities that are occurring in our facilities? Are you talking about vendors that are taking kids off-site? Because if it's on our side, it's on us and our.
Not necessarily.
right, so in this case, the after-before scare in this contract, that was the YMCA.
Okay.
So when we looked in the contract, we didn't see anything at that point that said that they had to or that we verified. So we needed to make sure our policies, because they do conduct a background check on their end, but we don't have anything in our policy or procedure to make sure that there is a verification check that it was actually done.
Okay.
That's putting in more context of the whole audit, that it's been a while since I've presented to the audit committee.
Okay,
But they do conduct their own, but how do we verify that? Where is there a sign off to say, we have completed this, so that if anything happens, we're held, we're protected.
To your point, putting it in the RFP is the easiest way to make that happen. The
Correct.
contractor has to comply with what's in the RFP, which I think might be why it's in finance, not HR. I saw some, this is a contract action, which might be, it's about people, but it's contract people. That might be why people are wondering who's on first.
Now I get it.
Let me ask a question, kind of taking it out of.
Microphone.
Taking it out of just this realm. And so, all right, back to the kind of teeth issue for the internal audit committee, okay? And I'm very much we will forget most of what we do today next time I come, and then we start talking. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I remember that. What, is there anything we can do, like, so that, I don't know, we can stay on top of things a little more? Like, we can, I don't know, press you or decide? Because in this, it seems like you said, you send an email to follow up, and then they write back and say, oh, okay, well, give me another year, we're still working on it. Give me another year, we're still working on it. I mean, what can we do as an audit committee, I don't know, to have some teeth? To, I guess, further your position with the board president, the superintendent, and 2 members of the school board here?
I think at this point, I think the support of the superintendent is going to be a great impact. So I think let's let that play out and see how that, because this is totally new. One, also the summary of reports is also new for the superintendent as well, as seeing this as a whole package, and then us bringing the small component out for you all. I think we need to rely on the superintendent's, intended action to proceed further to hold her staff accountable, and I think we could readdress this later. So my next question is, would you want this monthly or quarterly?
Monthly.
Yeah,
That's the
I would,
next.
yeah, my position would be monthly, and I think, I speak for myself. I have faith in the way you've reported to us and what has happened on my tenure on the audit committee, that I trust you to basically say, hey, listen, here's the email I sent. I'm not getting a response to this last one we did, because quite frankly, if it doesn't come from you, I see it when this packet comes out and, 85 pages of a packet, I'm generally likely to miss one of those where it's an email went out and lack of a response. So
Okay.
I'd be okay with quarterly coming from your office, with the caveat of you determine kind of what we voiced as a major concern to bring about. Does that make sense?
Oh, one more thing. I think on the board end, I would like to go back and look at what policies we have. Because if we don't have a policy addressing this, I think we need one.
I think it's going to be in our purchasing guidelines, or just, modify the purchasing guidelines. I have no preference for when we get this information. I'm going to review it when we get it. Monthly is fine, quarterly is fine. I would just advocate that we've spent like 20 minutes on this, and we haven't talked about anything else on the agenda. This is obviously something that we want to consume and really respond to, in addition to any actual audit reports that are on the agenda. So as you make this an operational priority, you need to consider that you're not going to do this in a 1-hour meeting on a monthly basis and cover all of the things that are already on the audit schedule. So,
Yeah, and I agree. I dread the word vision. My vision of this report, and the reason I asked Leah to prepare it was, this is the rip the Band-Aid one off. This is the first one. It's going to be a little ugly. It's going to have a lot of red ink on it. The intent would be that the audit committee, by bringing this issue to the attention of the senior leadership, this report hopefully will get a lot shorter. That's my goal, or that's where would we go, is that, hey, the late management action plan action items list is getting smaller and smaller, because as a committee, we're bringing attention to the issue. That's my hope. I could be wrong, but that's where I hope we're going, but we'll see. So,
Yeah,
open to experimentation.
I like having the conversation. We've gotten, this doesn't seem brand new to me. We've had these reports, summary of responses to action before, but it was not nearly as frequent. It was like maybe once or twice a year.
Yeah, so the summary of reports, which is at the end, which I'll need your approval on, this one comes once a year. It flows to the audit committee, but it's intended to support the strategic plan, and that's the summary of reports. So this is like pooling those items that are in there that have not been completed, or a date change has been provided to us. That's what we're putting in this management action report.
Okay. I think that's really helpful. I think the teeth and the power of the audit committee is that you look at this and you respond to the things that are, we respond to the things that we think are really, really important priority, and that goes directly into the ears of the board president, who conveys that to the superintendent. This is the committee that responds directly to the board. And so, there's the power that is within that. But I still think that we're going to do deep dives into this report each month when we get it, because whatever is happening, it's not just going to be an information item. And I think that's okay. I'm okay making this meeting 2 hours. I'm just saying, hey, y'all, our meeting about to be about 2 hours.
It takes what it takes.
Okay.
All right.
Just one other comment. Under remarks, I think it would be helpful for us and the superintendent to see what department is responsible for these responses, and if so, if there's individuals involved in those.
If I may,
Yes, ma'am.
I was also thinking that when this, if we could identify the vendor or the party involved, because if it was just the YMCA, I would understand that they offer the after-school program, and I would know who that was. But I circled it on mine because I was concerned about who are these folk. So I'm thinking if the report had said the YMCA, I think we would have had a better understanding of who we were actually talking about.
Well, I think part of, and I see your point of view, but I think part of it, this is a much older audit. So had it been newer and you saw it, it would have been more fresh in your mind that the after and before school care contract was the YMCA care, aftercare that they provide. So I think that was out of context, but what I could do for you is I can provide the audit reports and attachment. I don't know if that would be relevant of the ones that had been released prior, or, because that would put context for those who were not on the audit committee meeting, on the team during the time period which the audit occurred. So you see some context to this management's response.
Let's try that.
Okay.
This is just a report, so we don't have to
No.
take a vote, so. Next item, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sorry, one
Go
more
ahead.
thing. I just went on our purchasing page to see what was there, what was required for vendors. So we have some forms that vendors have to fill out. I mean, couldn't we just do a verification form as part of the process? I mean, it's,
However they decide to do it, yes, ma'am.
okay, so Dr. Watts, if policy development is something that is helpful and will be supportive of you, certainly we can do that. But on the operational side, you could create a required verification process that they have to do. I mean, they already have to do e-verification and some other things. So it may be easier than even it looks.
Yes.
Thank you.
In an odd mid-meeting segue, are there any comments on the minutes from our meeting of February 22nd? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from February.
I move that we approve the minutes with any necessary corrections.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the minutes from the February 2022 meeting. All in favor? Aye. All right, the minutes are approved. Now we'll turn it back over to Ms. Underwood for the audit reports.
Thank you. So today we have, last month, we brought the summary of business process review schools. Those were looking at, the purchasing, the payroll areas, student activity funds, as well as some student data. The school nutrition and the nurse section was within this report, but we wanted to, we like to pull these out separate because we asked the district management to respond to this one instead of the principal, because the district management has more directive authority to their actions, so we chose to break them out separate. So as you can see here, for the summary of business process reviews for school nutrition, we looked at 14 schools. This is looking wonderful compared to what prompted us to do the more district-wide school nutrition inventory audit that we conducted. So what I wanted to showcase is of the district actions is that they are going to, there was an introduction and formal training for all school managers scheduled for the S&P monthly meetings, managers meeting. So it's going to be ongoing in their reoccurring practice of the inventory processes. They've updated the inventory standard operating procedures and sent that all out to their site managers. And also, there is now an inventory variance tracking sheet, and that's prepared by the coordinator over the school nutrition managers for all sites, and that will be monitored monthly. So hopefully moving forward, you will see some better percentages. The only one that we will have to return to will be our error rate, remember, is 20% or more. So we will be looking at Gould, and we will also be looking, going back to Hodge. And if you look at the district's management response, in those particular schools, there was some additional one-on-one training that was needed for the school nutrition manager at Gould. And then at Hodge, that was a multi-site, and there is consideration to move the manager to a smaller site. So that information was provided to you. But they also provided all the other schools as well, but I just wanted to highlight the ones that we would be returning to.
Why was an error rate of 20% chosen?
So that's always a good question. So with 20%, we do that for also the front office staff with purchasing because they handle a lot of things more than just inventory. The way it's structured, same thing as the secretaries, they're multitasking to the point where there is a potential higher error rate that could happen. Because of, we liked it, we used to have it at 10%, but we were following up on, we were getting it going at 30 schools every year. So when we saw the 20% error rate, we thought in working with district management that that was an allowable rate, that is really, it's beyond needs improvement, it's inadequate, and that's when we're going back. However, if you, I mean, you as the audit committee, if you guys, you all would like to suggest that we make it smaller, I mean, that is what you can inform us to do.
Well, just help us, that 20% error is not, we're missing 20% of our nutrition materials. It's what goes into that 20% error
Of the
rate.
sample of 30 that we conducted,
Right.
20% of that, there was an error. That doesn't mean 20% items were missing. It could be that they were, not, there were 6 cases instead of 4 cases, or there could have been less as well, and then some we couldn't find. I mean,
Okay.
it could meet all those criteria.
That's an important clarification. We're not missing 20% of our food.
No,
Okay.
we're not. There's just error rate in the internal controls that we conducted, yes.
And I agree, Mr. Keller, I think that's high, but, we can do better, but I think that's, I'm just relieved to hear that that's not what the 20% means.
Yes.
Are there any other comments? And this is obviously, to your point, also a big improvement from where we started, so.
Very much. We were looking at 30% and higher in a lot of schools at one point after COVID.
Who named this audit?
This process has been in place 10,
Because to me, it's slightly a misnomer, because
Okay.
it's stated as school nutrition, but we're just checking food inventory. We're not really checking what we're eating, what we're ordering, It does a small percentage of what the waste actually is, and I know we had an audit a couple years ago about the actual waste. But maybe a bigger picture of what school nutrition is when we do these audits, and maybe couple them together, because this is just basically saying whether or not your inventory matches up to your inventory sheets.
So would you like us to add it within the business process reviews when we do the schools as well, and just do it as one big package?
I think that would
And then
make more
add
sense.
the weight inventory?
Because it would tell you what the actual waste is,
Okay.
and you get a better view. This is just one small element
Okay.
to the food used in schools.
It's named for the department, is it
Correct.
not?
Right, because the principal doesn't respond to the results of this because they work in connection with the nurses or the school nutrition staff.
Okay.
Now, on this spreadsheet right here, it says school nutrition, but if you look at the draft, it does say summary of school nutrition inventory reviews. But it's the management, the district management level that responds to these because they're the ones who sets the procedures and standards and monitors these individuals in the functions that we are presenting.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about the numbering? When I look at this report, it says, Hess, for example, says 2 out of 30. I look at Google, it says 8 of the food inventory items reviewed, but it doesn't say 8 out of 30.
If then that is an error that we made, so I can correct that. Where is that?
Well, that's on page 6, and also on page 5.
I see.
When you look at STEM, it says 2 of the food inventory.
Okay,
but it doesn't say
we
2
will
out of 30.
update that. We'll make sure that they all say out of 30. Thank you for that.
So they're all out of 30, is that correct?
All, with school nutrition, we can easily see it's always out of 30. Now, school nurses, that might not be the case.
I think those are some great questions, and I guess, are there any other questions about the nutrition audit?
Just one other comment about the percentage. We see that there's some zeros on here, so we know zeros are possible, right? I would just suggest maybe looking at an average, and anybody over an average, any schools that were over an average, maybe you go back and inspect those, because we know what's possible here. And to me, 1 out of 5 items seems high
I agree.
in an audit.
Okay.
All right. If there are no other questions, I'll entertain a motion to approve the audit with the notes as directed by Ms. Robinson.
I move to approve the audits with the notes.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we approve the audit of the school nutrition system. All in favor?
Aye.
The audit is adopted.
All right, for the summary of business process reviews for nurses. So what we review here, to put some context with what we review, is we look at the the student's medication administration form. And what that form is the parent saying, I'm bringing this medicine in, it's meant for this purpose, and this is how much the prescription is, and that should match what's on the bottle. And everybody signs off on it from the parent to the nurse to acknowledge there was receipt and the original count. The other thing we look at also is whether there was what we call an authorization to give medication form. So these forms are kind of labeled the same, so it may seem a little different. But the other form is actually where they document the count. Okay, so the authorization to give medication, that's where the parent signs off, this is what I brought you. The medication administration form is the form where the count, the daily count of that medication is. So what we found in this review is we found 8 schools. This is based on, remember, business process reviews are based on every 3 years with the principal, or if a principal has been on site for 3 years, we come out in the 4th year as a follow-up. Or if they're a new principal, not necessarily a new principal in the sense that they are new to the district, but new to that particular school. So it could have been a seasoned principal that has been shifted there. Now understand, when we go to this school, this is the first time they're there. So this, when they're a new principal to the site, this is us giving them information of insight of what exists. Whereas if they've been there for 3 or 4 years, that is a representation of what has been existing or what could have existed the year before, the current year. So what we see here is we have 8 schools with 1 school out of range that we will be returning to. So the district's actions that they provided us is a written reminder to thoroughly complete the documentation was sent to all team members following the receipt of this report. Team members were also instructed to review documentation protocols with their unlicensed assisted personnel, and that is the person that works with them on site, and staffing partners, which is also that would be potentially the nurse subs. We're asked to notify substitute nurses that a medication count should be conducted both before and after shift assignments.
Thank you. Just helping President Moss find the report in his packet. Any questions, comments? Yes, ma'am.
Could you tell me again which form this is? This is because I know that there's a form that I signed for my child to be able to take medicine, from the nurse's office. I'm disappointed that my perception of the rigor around controlling having aspirin and stuff or whatever in schools is not as strong as I thought it was, because I was really, really insistent, oh, you can't be walking around with pills. Here, you got to have this form because this is important, but I'm not
I
seeing.
have the same parent
you've seen that
experience.
too?
Yeah, I have the exact same parent experience with 2 high schoolers, yes. You
Yeah,
cannot take any of that to school.
Yeah, so my question is, which form is it? Because I was looking for the form that I thought you were talking about, which is the general, here you can have medicine, or here's the medicine, and you must go to the nurse's office to take it. But I'm seeing another form online about the administration of an EpiPen or asthma inhaler. So which form were we assessing in this audit?
There was 2 forms. The first one is called the authorization to give medication school form.
Okay, I think that's
the one
I'm
that, as a
familiar
parent,
with. Okay.
you fill out saying this is what it is, this is why you're supposed to be giving it, or when you're supposed to give it. If it's a controlled, it has to match what the prescription label says. The parent cannot alter that. However, if it's a PRN, allergy medicine, not necessarily an EpiPen, but just there because allergies can be bad during certain seasons, or headache medicine or whatever source. It's as needed is typically what you usually see. So you'll see that, and then you'll see the nurse's signature and the parent signature. So we look for all that to be completed. And we use that form in next to what they call the medication administration form. The medication administration form is where it documents when the medication was given to the student. And that's where, on a monthly basis, the principal and the nurse are supposed to get together and do a medicine count. Okay, so we do a check-in on that to make sure that those are being completed timely. That's why there was some findings where they were not completed, or there was some missing dates. And sometimes that's usually when a sub comes in, they'll notate it on another sheet to give to the nurse to fill in on this sheet. But that's not the practice that the district wants. The district wants these nurses because they are certified in nursing. They're not, an intern by any means. They have to follow that license structure, that they come in and fill out the paperwork just like they would be if they were an actual nurse for, employed by the district and not through the substitute company.
So, thank you, that's really helpful. But even more problematic if you have something as high as 30% error rate in either not writing down what was administered or administering things that are not approved. And to me, that is very high risk and exposure when we're talking about drugs. So 31% here means that for all three types of form, for both forms?
In Islands, it was just the medication administration form. It wasn't documented daily to identify if medication was administered.
Okay, all right. I'm going to stop asking questions about this.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm sorry.
I don't know. I mean, I find that very troubling, right? Because, we'll say because of my profession, right? If it's not documented, it didn't happen. And so if we're now saying, I mean, even 5 students' medication was not documented daily showing it was taken, I mean, that's a huge issue.
Right.
I mean, I guess that's beyond my concern for documentation of does a background check match the procedures for another background check. I mean, this is now a nurse that's supposed to be documenting giving a student medicine daily. Now, again, I'm going to hope that this medicine daily had to do with maybe a headache and is not anything like blood pressure medication or anything of that nature. I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm just, 31% is huge to me. I mean, even, and I think Gould had the administrative form, so I'm a little less concerned with that. I guess what's the follow-up? Like, how do we go back and check right away to make sure that it actually got documented and continued?
So what we do is we immediately let the principal know that this issue is existing, because it could be that they're not doing their medicine counts like they should have been doing as well, because we look from the start of school to the point of when we go in there. So it's not like it just happened potentially the week that we were in there. It could have happened within months before. And these kind of things should be caught during their monthly count with the nurse. So we do that, but then we also immediately contact the district's lead nurse and let them know of this situation so she can go in and address it ASAP. Because ultimately, she is responsible over the nurses from that standpoint.
Thank you.
Lee, on this particular audit, I think it would be helpful if you broke out the error type for each.
Okay.
That would help identify and correct, I believe.
Okay, we can do that as well.
And for Islands, again, my question is 5 out of how many?
Yeah, I know. Sorry about that. That is, we did not proofread well enough on these, and we are sorry on that one. But we will follow up on that as well.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to suggest some solutions. Nurses are very, very valuable, and I don't want any nurses to be demoralized when they hear us talking about these findings at this meeting. This might be, as you said, nurses have a very specific skill set that is not this administration in some ways. And maybe we should be looking at this systemically for what happens when a child goes into the nurse's office to get their medication. Maybe the use of a form that someone needs to fill out and check out, maybe that's not the right system. And my suggestion may not be a good one, I'm okay with that, but here it is. The whole late scan-in process that students use when they get to school late, I think it's fascinating that they can scan, get a sticker, print, go out the door. It's not signing the book at all schools like it used to be. It's very automated, it's very technology-driven. Are there ways for us to do what hospitals do, use QR codes and scan? You know, if a kid has a drug and they take it on a regular basis, can the QR code be put on, can a code of some kind be generated that's unique to that student that goes on the bottle? She picks up the bottle, scans it, dispenses it, and it's gone and it's done. And that tracks the data maybe in a secure place in SharePoint, because I know this is medical information. So I know I'm creating a lot, but what I'm saying is there something that is procedurally easier for nurses to collect accurate data real time that will help support reducing this error rate rather than us slowing down the speed of care in that office, because we don't know what's happening. You know, one person's bleeding, one person needs aspirin. You know, how, you know, managing what's happening in that room may need some additional assistance.
Are we dealing with paper forms right now? Is that, wow, okay. I absolutely agree. It's 2024.
Yes, we are.
I would say, I imagine every school nurse that's listening is probably saying, yes, that's absolutely what we need. Absolutely a way to do it as opposed to marking paper forms. So I don't know what the cost and all that goes into it, but not for me. Just concerned with getting it documented they gave medicine.
We did make sure that we cross-referenced attendance with these.
Yes.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that the child
Yeah,
is
because
actually in school.
there's a whole process for them, that even if it's a no-show, in other words, they check to see if they're absent, and if they're absent, they mark it absent. If it's a no-show, in other words, they check, the student's there, but the student doesn't come to the nurse's station, they mark it as no-show. So there is an extensive documentation process that they have on their end to acknowledge that either the student was absent or they were a no-show. They even document whether they were late, because some of this medication has to be a timed situation. And so they even notate to the level of if they came to the nurse's station late, so the medication. And there's also a communication, from my understanding, that goes to the parent to say, hey, just to let you know, George came in 3 hours behind this time, because some of this medication has to be timed out correctly. So my understanding, it goes to that extent. But we just look at the surface controls, which is that form, those two forms.
Correct, okay, and I understand that you have like an entire system of a breakdown if there's a no-show, but I guess my main question is, when you're doing the audit, you're looking at the surface, that someone didn't return this form 5 times. Was that child in school, or do we not know? Do we know?
No, so the administration form, the initial one is usually in the beginning of the school or whenever the medicine becomes a part of that child's life. So we use that form to make sure it's complete, that the nurse could even, give that medication to them. So we make sure that's all complete. And then what we do is we use the start count of what's on that form. That should be supported on the other medication administration form. So that's where we also start the count thing to make sure those two match. And then at that point, we see the progression of that medicine being released based on what is directed on that other form. And that's supposed to match as well. And then at that point, we look to see if, like I said, if it's absent, then we do go back to verify, was the child marked absent for that day? If it's a no-show, we look, now that part, we haven't looked to see if they were absent or not absent. We just assume that.
Because it's two entirely different things.
Right.
And it's much more scary if the child was in school the 5 days. It's a lot less scary if we're dealing with paper forms, and although the paper form should have been filled out, and we've all discussed that tech would be a better realm for this at this point, if the child wasn't there for 5 days because the child was sick and the forms weren't filled out, that's a completely different scenario than if the child was there.
Right, and we only mark that error as one error
Okay.
and not 5 errors. We're looking to see if that form was
And what
completed.
got us to 31%?
That there was either an incomplete form, if I can remember correctly with Islands, it was, and I'd have to look up, I got my computer, I could follow up with you, but it could potentially have been because of the,
Everyone can hear me, but not online. Sorry.
you know, because they didn't have completed forms. I mean, if something as simple as the parent's signature is not on the form,
Okay.
we're
Could we
not,
get a better breakdown of why Islands is at 31%? Because what we're looking
I
at
can
is
follow up with that.
just 5 times not filling out one. Not that that's a great thing to happen, but it would be more beneficial for us to understand where we got to the 31%. Because I don't think we have enough information to tell us
Okay.
why we're there. Thank you.
And I appreciate your feedback because, you know, we've been presenting these to you for many years now, and I appreciate the in-depth knowledge that y'all want to know now because we hadn't received that before. You just, you know, accepted, you know, what we had provided you in the documentation. So I appreciate your feedback on how you want to make this process a little better. Thank you.
I'm going to take a point of personal privilege and just compliment Nurse Black at Garrison because she's awesome. I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Nurse Black. So please don't be demoralized, and I'm sorry Anna has a tummy ache again, I'm sure. So thank you. With that personal note, is there a motion to accept the report as noted with the additional requirements that we get some additional color and depth on Islands High?
I so moved.
I second.
It's been properly moved and accepted that we accept the audit committee, the audit report for the business process of nurses. All in favor?
Before you take action,
Yes, ma'am.
before you take action, can we have discussion on it? I'm here, in listening to the request for information on the last 2 reports, I'm wondering if this is not indirect feedback on the change in our reporting format on this information.
Very good point.
Does this reflect information that we pulled out to simplify the reports that we need to put back in? Or do our questions reflect oversimplification of this information, or is it information that would not have been in old forms or the new form?
No, it would have, we have been pulling these out for a few years now. So when you're saying the forms, are you talking about the report? Or you-
Yeah, I mean the format of the report.
Okay.
We went to a more streamlined, easy-to-consume version, and what I'm asking you is, you've been doing this for some time. The questions that you're hearing from us, are they reflecting the fact that we've oversimplified the audit report and we need to put something back? The superintendent is nodding.
I would, yeah.
So on this one in particular, my thoughts as I was listening is that if a school has a certain threshold, for example, we've all, for whatever reason, we've honed in on Islands because it's the highest. If it hits a certain threshold, whether it be 20%, 30%, that we do give a little bit more detail. Because what it felt like the committee was really honing in on tracking whether medication was administered or not. But what I heard Leah say towards the end was it meant the form was incomplete. It did not mean necessarily that the child did or did not get medication. It could have been a parent's signature. It could have been, so for me personally, I think we would identify a certain error rate, and once it hit that threshold, we would want to provide a little bit more
Okay.
nuance. I mean, those are just my thoughts as I was.
Thank you.
We can move forward with that. Now, my next question is, we're not doing that with the schools. When we look at student activity funds, we're kind of having these we have this blanket kind of statement that we've always added into these, because this is actually not an audit per se. These are considered continuous monitoring activities. And so this is just information that we provide to the principals as a hey, this is what's going on in your building. I know your focus is on academic, but we need to let you know what's going on in these areas as well. So we can add that as well to the school level, so it's consistent, and this just bring them all together back again. Because that process I think, was kind of taken out probably before COVID is when that process began. So that'll give you the full compass of the whole school collectively, and we can really redesign this as well to give you better feedback based on what you have asked.
I think that's great. Yeah, I think we get
Okay.
better every time. We put something out there, we adjust it. I think it's great.
Right.
It's working. We're fine tuning, I think, and that's great. I think that's why we're all here. So,
Yep.
with that discussion completed, we will vote on the motion. All in favor? Aye. All right. The report is adopted. Leah, I believe that leaves you with your summary.
All right, so the summary reports. This is a summary of various internal and external reports and program reviews that is used by the districts for tools for continuous improvement. This is part of the strategic plan moving forward right now as well that the superintendent and her team is rebuilding. Refreshing, I should say, and then as well as the strategic plan that has existed before. This is a report that's typically given to the board once a year that provides insight to any reviews that have been conducted within the district. So we have made some changes to the report. We've added what we call progress monitoring results, and we've updated a code called reporting in school year 24-25 because we didn't want you all to think that it was incomplete. So, and I'll highlight some areas where you'll see that. And again, like you saw in the management action report, we also added the original and current date reference so you can see how many times management has requested us to change the date as well. So you'll see that under highlights on page, if you go to page 7, we'll touch on the progress monitoring results. What we're looking at here is the on-time completion and completion date changes. That is going to be part of our KPIs that we will be monitoring as part of our new strategic plan. But we also wanted to add these other ones because we do want to highlight when there are audits in our district that don't have any recommendations. That means it was a clean audit. So I do want to highlight those. We wanted to highlight, and this is the date as of December 31st, 2023. So this is not as of today. We had a cutoff date. Moving forward, we're going to shift the report to coincide with the fiscal year. So the next report like this won't come out until July, in our July or August meeting, however it falls out in 2025. So you will actually have a year and a half included on that. But we need to align it so that we follow through with the strategic plan with the budget and all that coincides with all these things so that we're streamlining it the same and the baseline is the same on the strategic plan. So this, remember, is as of December 31st, 2023. So as of that time period, 54% was complete, 12% had open recommendations, and open means that they were reporting. They won't report until school year 24-25 because of the date of which they provided us. In progress means they're still working on it. That could have been their response, and there should be possibly, that's what existed before. As you could see in the management action report that we previously provided to you, there is not any completion date changes because those dates have not been provided to us. So at this point, it's 0%. And then on-time completion was 15%. So that is an added component of this report, so you could see from a yearly perspective where we're moving through that. So an example of a report of school year 2024, as you could see on the grid, we have we have it color-coded so you could see. So let's go to the HVAC audit. And that is on, thought I had that marked. Or let's go to the HR activities audit, the one that we just provided you. That would be on page 32. As you could see, these dates are May 2024 or July 2024, and that's where we put in the current status reporting in fiscal 24-25, or in school year 24-25, excuse me. Any question on that change? And then also, as well as the original and current date reference, you can see that we're adding, much like what you saw in the management action report, anytime, whatever the initial response, whatever the initial date was, and that's under the current and estimation completion column, to the current date of which, the last date of which they shared with us as to when it was due.
Are there any comments, questions? I would just say that page 35, Dr. Watts, might be helpful to you. It looks like a pretty good scorecard that kind of gives us, if I'm understanding what page 35 is, it looks like kind of a balanced scorecard type report.
Of
that gives
all
us
our
a-
summary, yeah,
The summary of all the
process
business
reviews that
actions,
we just
conveniently
discussed.
color-coded. Thank you. Do we adopt this report, or we do? Okay. If there are no questions, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the report as submitted.
I'll move to adopt the report as submitted. Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we accept the summary of reports. All in favor?
Aye.
I believe with a minute to spare, we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Nurse Black.